Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Cage My IQ interviews. I'm your host, Cage. Today we have the wonderful women's flyweight contender, Miranda Maverick. How's it going, Miranda?
Going well. Thanks for having me on.
Now, usually how I work this is for somebody that's coming on for the first time, I dive right into your early life a little bit to let the viewers learn a little bit about you before we dive into your current matchup that you have next week against Sabina Mazo. From what I've learned about your past, is you worked on a farm for most of your early life. Is that true?
Yes, so my family still owns a ranch in Missouri, but as a youth, I moved around a lot. My dad was a real estate developer, and we'd go to rural places and fix them up, working on like farm life, all the way from building fence to milking cows to whatever needed done. And did that my entire life growing up. And then we settled in Missouri and have our ranch there since I was about 15.
Now, being that you were a kid, how was life like doing that as a kid? Like I know normal kids go play, hang out with their friends and whatnot. How was it like working on the farm?
Well, it was hard work, but I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's created who I am today. It made me definitely understand responsibility and work ethic as a young child and discipline, which I think a lot of people lack nowadays. And the only thing that I would say was a little bit more difficult was just moving around from school to school. My dad didn't quite have enough time to homeschool me, or neither of my parents did. My mom was working too. And luckily, my siblings, I homeschooled them as they grew
Yeah.
up. So wish I would have had that opportunity too, and I don't plan on sending my kids to school either.
Yeah. Now moving on to high school, you joined the wrestling team, and then you also a little bit before that, you started training grappling. First, what made you want to wrestle, and then what kind of grappling background did you get early on?
Well, my dad had always taught me a little bit about self defense, and we watched the UFC growing up and tried to learn the moves at home and taught arm bars and chokes, and we learned it on each other. And so then when I was 16, old enough to drive myself to a gym, I asked my dad if I could go and actually try Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And he was like, awesome, yeah, find a way to pay for it and you go do it. And so I did. And I went to a gym, fell in love with it within a couple of weeks. It became my passion. And once I started jujitsu, I figured why not try wrestling and see if I can get a free ride to college that way. And so I did I did wrestling my senior year. Didn't end up going to college for it and ended up getting a full ride with academics instead. So I actually quit wrestling in the middle of the season once I knew it wasn't going to get me to college and spent my time working instead.
Now it says here you went to well, you're currently still going to college. It says for psychology. What made you pick psychology as a major?
So it's industrial organizational psychology, which is kind of
Yeah.
like business psychology. One, it makes good money. Two, there's a high outlook for it, and you get to deal with both the business side of things and the people thinking side of things, which is always kind of what I had interested in. And so now here I am as a statistician, working as a
Yeah.
contracted employee at Hershey, and it's been an amazing ride to get there.
Now it says here that you decided that you wanted to transition from wrestling to MMA. What came first? You wanted to do MMA, or you wanted to go to college for psychology? Because I know you were doing both at the same time, right after high school.
Yeah, there was never a thought of separating the two of them. As soon as I turned 18, it was basically the same month that I got into college and moved there. And because that's the law in Missouri, is you have to be 18 to fight. I think I had a fight like 3 weeks after I turned 18 and a couple weeks after I'd started college. I know I was weight cutting
Yeah.
when we had orientation when they give out all the free food. So that was a fun ride.
Now, was that something for you where it was like a safe plan for you that if anything ever happened with MMA where it didn't work out, that at least you had the psychology degree that you could fall back on that?
Yeah, and it still is that way. I'm finishing up my master's right now. I was going for PhD. That didn't end up happening, unfortunately, not due to my fault. But I'm going to have my master's in psychology, and no matter what, I'll always have that to fall back on. And right now, I am handling both at once. I'm working with that degree, and I'm also doing my MMA and being successful at both. And I plan on, once my MMA career is over, plan on capitalizing perhaps on that degree and hopefully not using it at all and starting my own business.
Now, did you start doing any other MMA training in college other than jiu-jitsu to get you well
Yes.
versed in MMA? And then how was it like the first time you started working on the amateur scene? I know you went 7-1 before you got that call to go to Invicta.
Yeah, so like I said, I only did wrestling for 3 months my high school year. I didn't do wrestling. So it shows me as the college wrestling team in college, but I wasn't technically officially a part of it because one, I wasn't allowed to. I was already a professional fighter by the time that I had joined that wrestling team. And NCAA rules are you cannot compete as a professional athlete in any collegiate sports. So I was never able to compete with them. I just trained with the team, did like the strength and conditioning, and every once in a while would do the live wrestling with them. So obviously jiu-jitsu was my home game, but I went to Springfield Fight Club and they had primarily kickboxing as their striking focus as well. And as soon as I said that I wanted to do MMA just a few months before I turned 18, they were like, all right, we need to get you in here for striking. And I think I did a striking class for a few weeks before we had set up my first amateur fight. And, it was one of those things where if I won the fight and I liked the feeling of punching this girl in the face, then I'd go on to be the best I could be. And if I didn't like that feeling or I lost, I would never do it again and just say it was a fun day. And obviously I ended up winning in the first round for my first amateur fight. And my next goal is to become a pro by the time I turn 19. And I actually signed the contract with Invicta a week before I turned 19.
So you had majority of those fights when you were 18.
I did all 8 of. I had 8 fights at 18. Yeah.
How was it like to balance both careers in psychology and MMA? I can only imagine you going to school full time and then training full time at the same time, or at least close to full time. It must have been a hectic schedule.
I think I surprised a lot of people. I was training full time. I was going to school full time in undergrad, and I was working full time as a waitress. So I was doing it all. I would train at night, study, anytime in the middle of the day, and I would work on the days that I didn't have classes, and on weekends I would work double shifts.
Was there any point in time where while you're doing all this that the grind started getting to you and then you started thinking to yourself, maybe this is too much for me? Or was it just like, I want to do this so much that I'm okay with the grind and whatever happens, I'm going to get through it?
More the last, it was miserable there for a while. Mentally, it was hard, especially as it just kept going on, and there's not really any light at the end of the tunnel when you first start doing that. But I feel like when you're young, when you have no other responsibilities other than yourself, that's the time to be selfish in your life and go after everything, because there's not going to be another time in your life where you're able to do that. There's going to be other people to depend on you. There's going to be other responsibilities that you have to take care of. And I figured I might as well start investing young. And even though I had my college paid for, I was able to put a lot of money back through college by working through it. Plus the MMA career, had I not started at that age, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now. I might not even be fighting. So I think it was a smart decision to do it all. And I still am doing it all. And a lot of people say, maybe that hurts my MMA career. But so far I've been able to juggle them all very well. And even if I wasn't working now, I would find something else to fill my time. I still train just as much as I would if I wasn't doing anything else.
Now, after the amateur side of your career, you get the call, go to Invicta. I know your first couple fights were at strawweight before you get settled into flyweight. Was it just something where the weight cut was too much for you? Because I knew you missed weight a couple times. Or did you just want to try strawweight and then you knew all along that flyweight was going to work better for you in the long run?
I fought flyweight my entire amateur career except one fight at 118. And you have to understand a girl at 18 years old is not quite as big as a girl at 19 years old. I was just growing and building a lot of muscle. I tried it because the UFC only had a 115-pound division at the time. And I was like, if I want to make it to my dream, which is the UFC, I'm not going to fight at 125 because they don't have that. So I tried 115 twice. Obviously, it didn't work out. Now, mind you, I didn't have like professional, helpers to help me with my nutrition and everything at the time. I couldn't afford that. So that was part of it. But also I was just really big framed. And now I'm a big frame for 125 too, not in height, but in stockiness. So I eventually went back to 125 after missing weight pretty bad the second time, which there were other complications involved too, but no excuses, you know. Finally went to flyweight, and I've done very well there. And thank goodness the UFC decided to adopt flyweight, I think, within a year of that.
Yeah, you picked up your first couple wins and moving the flyweight and Invicta, and then you did the infamous Phoenix Series tournament. How was it like to do that tournament? Because I knew you had like how the tournament runs. You got to win. Was it 3 or 4 fights? And is that within a day? Or
Yeah,
like you do that all the same day?
within all the same hour and a half, I think. We had like 20 minutes in between each one. There was no time to unwrap gloves or anything like that. You just stay warmed up between the fights and you walk right back out and fight again. It was intense, to say the least. High adrenaline. My biggest thing was to keep myself calm, because adrenaline would get to me so much usually after fights. And so I thought of it like rounds of a fight. The first fight was just 1 round, you know, the second fight was just 2 rounds. And I had to keep that focus instead of being like, whoa, I won the first one, you know, and then I have an adrenaline dump 10 minutes later. So it was very exciting. Obviously, it helped my following a lot, and it got me noticed a lot more. I thought I would be pulled to the UFC right after that, but at the end of the day, I'm glad everything worked out the way it did, because my debut ended up being great. And, you know, my journey in the UFC is just beginning.
How did it feel to culminate that tournament with a win against Deanna Bennett? I knew you had lost her early in your Invicta career. So did it feel any better to win the tournament by beating her and getting that revenge against her?
I am very glad we faced each other in the finals, because the first 2 fights were just 1 round, you know, and anybody can say, well, had it gone longer, they would have won or they would have lost if you don't finish it. And so the Deanna Bennett, they asked me if there was anybody in that tournament I wanted to fight. And I was like, yeah, only one name, Deanna Bennett, you know, because I want to avenge that loss.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the finals, like I predicted, we were there, and I ended up finishing her, which was the first time she'd been finished, I think, too, other than by Sajara Eubanks. Maybe it was in Invicta. I can't remember. But I was pretty excited and, you know, got that basically neck crank. It wasn't necessarily a choke, and was really excited to have won that and gotten my first real taste of money within MMA too.
Then right after the tournament, a little bit later, you had that fight against Pro Gonzalez. You pick up the win there. How long after that did you get the call from the UFC for you to come in and fight for them?
Well, there were short notice fights before I actually took the call
Okay.
with UFC. So, you know, there were like 3-day notice things. There were, you know, 1 fight contracts that you could do. And I just refused those, because I knew at one point they'd actually want me in there. They'd want me to have a 4-fight contract, want me to go in there, right? And eventually I took the fight after the Pro Gonzalez one. At first I wanted the title shot, but then COVID came, of course, and ruined that, to where Vanessa was not able to come to the United States at the time, so we were not able to fight for the title. I was a little bit irritated, honestly, to have to fight Pearl. I thought I should have gotten a straight shot to the title, but I think they wanted her to be the champion. You know, she's got a larger following. And so, yeah, I was really excited to finally get an offer from the UFC, 4-fight contract, 10-day notice, I think. And then I ended up not being able to do my debut, you know, and had eye problems, had to go do eye surgery, thought I'd never fight again, really thought worse than that I'd go blind, and that's what they were telling me. So I was really excited to finally be able to taste my dream in October when I came back and had my debut.
Now, during all of that, I know that you had graduated and got your degree, but then you wanted to get your PhD, which wound up you're doing right now, or you were doing in Virginia. So I know you picked up and moved from Missouri to Virginia. At what point in time did you do that during all this with the Invicta and the UFC?
It was towards not the end of my Invicta career, but right in the middle of it. I think I moved to Virginia in 2018. I think it was, 2018. Moved out there to do my PhD. Ended up getting my master's. I'm still finishing up my thesis.
Yeah.
But all my classes are actually done for my PhD, aside from 1 class. So it's kind of irritating that I've kind of been held back and made to just get my master's. I was given an ultimatum of PhD or MMA, and I chose MMA, of course. because it's one of those things you can only do when you're young.
Yeah.
And so, the rest, I decided to move to Colorado because I think it's one of the best teams in the world. I had anywhere I could have chosen to move to, basically. And my husband, Pete, had gotten out of the military within like the same week that I was done with school. And the day he was out, we moved.
Now, is that at the point in time when you started also to train at the House of Muay Thai? Because I know you were there for a couple of years before you moved to Elevation.
Yes, when I moved to Virginia, the day I got there is when I started training at the House of Muay Thai. Basically, it was the gym closest to the gym with the highest talented coaches.
Now you get into the UFC and you make your debut. I believe it was on Fight Island. I believe it was against Luana Jojoa. How did it feel to get that first round finish? I know it was by they had to have her like basically end the fight because of the gash on her in between her eyes from that nasty front elbow that he did to her. How did that feel to pick up that victory in your first fight and then to have it done by stoppage?
It was the ideal debut. You can't really make it much better than that. And especially to be able to show off my striking for one of the first times. I had slowly improved my striking, but it's funny that my first couple fights in the UFC, I was noticed as a striker more than a grappler, when in the past it was the exact opposite. So people still, especially from my last fight, think that I'm a striker, not a grappler. Yeah. So I'm kind of excited to go in there with everybody's blindfolds on and rock their world.
Yeah, and more so in the Jillian Robertson fight, they were saying she was the grappler and you were the striker. And I knew all along in the background that you had like a grappling background. And I go, they must be selling you short because they're calling you a striker, and that's the thing that you were just starting to learn at the time. But you pick up the victory there. I thought you did very well in that matchup, considering the fact. And then you go into the Barber fight, and of course we had the controversial decision there. How did you feel after that? Because I felt like you had the victory, and then the judges gave it to Barber.
I think everybody felt that way. I'm almost bored talking about it. Of course, I think I won that fight. Afterwards, I always try to be respectful. If you lose, you lose. But it's one of those things where when I went back to the hotel room and I actually sat down and watched the fight, I was mad. I was very mad. That's money out of my pocket that can keep me from going places. So it was very frustrating to have lost a fight purely from a judge's standpoint when everybody else in the world saw it differently.
Yeah. Now, you came into your last fight against Blanchfield. She won by a unanimous decision. Have you learned anything from that fight to incorporate into anything going forward? Like, did you notice anything that you're doing wrong? And now going into this fight that you took on short notice, that you're actually incorporating to kind of fine tune your game?
I think if you don't notice anything from a loss, then you're doing everything wrong. I, of course, notice things. It's frustrating to talk about because, one, I think I had an off night. Two, I think it was a mental thing more than anything. I lost the first round, and if people go back and look at my history of fights, I don't know if I've ever lost the first round before. And it was obvious in my mind that was the case. And I think I got really down on myself and kind of had a downward spiral from there. What wasn't supposed to happen in the fight happened. And, Erin's really good. I don't mean to take any credit from her. And I think she'll do very well in the division. But I've been working on bottom. I've been working on my wrestling game. Like you said, I do have a good grappling background, but she was just half a step ahead of me the whole time. And kudos to her for that. Whether I didn't get finished or not, I don't think matters. I think that was the first fight I feel like I've ever actually got beat. I've had fights I've lost before that were decisions, but they were close. This one wasn't close, and I acknowledge that, and I'm ready to go back in there and try to never have that happen again.
Now we're moving to the current now. We have a fight with you between you and Sabina Mazo. Originally, it was supposed to be Mazo fighting Mandy Bone, but Mandy Bone had to back out. Did you call the UFC, or did the UFC call you to take the fight on short notice?
I got the call. It was actually just a week or so prior to that I said, hey, I'm available for short notice fights too, 10 days or more. And I had been waiting and begging for a fight and already contacting my manager and asking them to contact the matchmaker and give me a fight, give me a fight, give me a fight. I've been told, it'd be like May, if not later. And I was like, oh, this is annoying. Like 6 months between fights. Like, I don't want that. I try to have like 3 fights a year is my goal, at least. And so when this short notice one popped up and her name got thrown my way, I was like, sure, let's do it.
How has the weight cut been going for the fight? Considering you took it on short notice and the fight's going to be within the next week and a half, was there any doubt with you with the weight cut, and that's why it's still at flyweight, or like did he ask you about that, and then you were just like it shouldn't be an issue?
Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue. I tell them short notice because I know I can make the weight. I keep in fight shape. I've been training really hard with my other teammates, some that are getting ready for fights as well. And I never really blow up between fights anyway. But ever since I've moved to Colorado and been focused on the UFC, I mean, that's my main goal in life right now. So I keep my weight where I need it, to where if this kind of thing happens, I can pick it up and go. And the day they called me, I probably could have made weight within 5 days, and so I'm just staying at what I was basically when they called me, and then I'll be ready for the weight cut next week.
Now, what do you know about Sabina Mazo, and what have you been doing to kind of prep yourself for the fight?
Well, I know Sabina pretty well just because she used to be the champion for LFA. And at that time, I was trying to get that title fight as well. So I've already studied her in the past. And then, of course, just had to kind of rewatched her fights. I like analyzing fights, watching them, seeing if there's little tricks they have that I need to watch out for. And, of course, Sabina has her high kicks that she has. She has a good jab. She has decent striking. And I plan on capitalizing there with my power and kind of bullying that I think I'll be able to do over her and push her around, as well as the grappling. But I think my striking is actually better than hers as well, and I plan on showing all of it.
What's been a typical week of training been like since you went from the House of Muay Thai to Team Elevation? Has anything changed a lot, or was it just a little changes that you made for weekly training?
No, everything's changed a lot, and that's why I moved. The gym that I had there was a great gym. They really improved my striking. My coaches were great. But here they actually have MMA. There it was jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and the only MMA I would get was basically with my coach, Mackin Simmerser, who is a prior UFC and WEC vet. And so I would train with him and like a couple of the guys that had decent takedowns and stuff. But here at Elevation, we train MMA every day. I have on my MMA gloves every day. We spar in a cage, which is a huge advantage. And I get to spar a couple times a week with girls who are my size and my skill level, instead of being, amateur fighters or even other sports that they participate in. And so a lot of it's different. Plus, I get to have trainings in the morning. I get to spread out my day instead of having all my trainings basically at night, which is what it was before. And
I bet it also is nice that you get to go in there and pick the brains of other fighters, considering it's other MMA fighters that are trained there too, because you got a bunch of people there that have a lot of experience as well, and you can just go up to them and pick their brain and ask them a question if you have any.
Yeah, you could do that, but I think the biggest advantage is the coaches and stuff. I get to pick and choose which coaches I want, and that's been a big advantage, and see which ones I best fit with and have the best techniques that I like learning. So I'm really excited to be a part of this team and ready to show what we've been working on in the octagon.
What I like most about you is the fact that you have not only do you have 4 fights to your belt already, but you're only 24 years old. You're very young, and for you to be in the top 15 and only be 24 is a testament to show how much work you've put into your training, and you got a lot of a future ahead of you to where you can still improve and still get to the top of the division at a young age. How does that make you feel, knowing that you fought some good competition at such a young age?
I really see the whole age as a number thing. It's almost irritated me through my life of people being like, well, you're so young, like you're too young, you should slow down, you should do this.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I feel like I should have been here when I was 22. I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball compared to what I could have done via mistakes that I've made or like mental blocks that I've had when I fought. And I'm just ready to go back in there and move back up the ladder. Obviously, I've had these 2 losses, although a lot of people consider it 1 loss. And, I'm not in the top 15 anymore. And I was in my first 2 fights, which was an
Yeah.
amazing feeling. I was really excited. But now the goals just keep getting higher. I want to be back in the top 15, then the top 10, then the top 5, then become the title contender, and then the title holder. And, I don't want to be in this sport until I'm 40 trying to do that. I plan on doing that fairly soon and working really hard to get there.
That's what I like about MMA in the current. 10 years ago, the average age was probably debuting was probably 30 to 32 for fighters. Now it's 21 to 24 is kind of the average day. You've gotten younger fighters that are starting to debut, and they're learning the game a lot younger, and it's translating. It's giving you guys more of a career where you can start younger and have a lot more fights, whereas it used to just be you see guys get 6 to 8 fights and then they retire because of the how late that they debuted into the sport. And I agree with you. I think age wise it shouldn't matter. To me, it should just matter if you've made it or not, if you've done enough to make it and then get signed. Because if you got signed, that means you must be doing something right with your training to where the UFC is calling you to come in and fight for them. Dana White's not going to just sign anybody. He signs people that he feels have a future with the company. And I definitely think you have a big future with the company. You've made the move from House of Muay Thai to Team Elevation, and Team Elevation is a big fight camp, and they wouldn't bring you on if they didn't feel like you had a future as well. So I have a feeling that you're going to pick up the victory next week. I'm interested to see where you go from here. Like, depending on this fight, how soon do you think you feel like you can fight if you have nothing major happen in next week?
I mean, I feel like I could fight within the next month, but I plan on waiting a few months, probably June or July, and having the next fight then, and then taking another one in fall. The way I space it out, make sure I have time for family and things of that sort. Seminars that I had planned that I already had to reschedule all that. But yeah, I'm excited. And going back to the age thing, I think it's about the reason that they're younger fighters isn't necessarily, that I think it's more about there's more people training now. So there's more people to choose from. And there's these kids, and I'll just say it that way. There's girls now that are training MMA at the age of 4, coming up in this sport, evolving the sport, which is amazing. And that's why, people will be like, who's the GOAT? And I'm like, that changes every day. To think that there's only one person 20 years ago that could have beat anybody today is kind of ridiculous, I think. I think it just keeps on evolving. People are training their whole lives instead of, one discipline like they used to, and then just jumping into the other one late on. And even I have that disadvantage of like, I didn't jump into striking until I was, 18, and jiu-jitsu only 16, when there's these other girls that have been training since they were kids. Kay Hansen, Erin Blanchfield, like they're just some examples.
Now, moving forward, one of the questions I usually ask people is, what are some of the things that you like to do outside of MMA, like some hobbies or just everyday things that you like to do to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
always
keep
tell
your
people I don't have that free time. Everybody jokes that everybody has hobbies. I'm like, yeah, my hobby is working, and I guess you'd say doing seminars and stuff. I enjoy training, and therefore I make it work for me and make money for me, and be able to share knowledge with people all the way from self-defense to MMA. And that's one of my passions. But when I do get the quote unquote free time, usually I'm supposed to go on walks to kind of help my metabolism and stuff anyway. And instead I'll turn it into a hike, especially here in Colorado with it being so pretty and having so many opportunities for that. And then anytime I get a chance, I go back home and spend it with family. It's just a really nice, relaxing time to go sit on the farm, read a book, or just go on there and spend time with family.
Now, I know you mentioned before that you had the job with psychology. Are you currently working with that job, or are you just right now full-time MMA?
No, I'm working. I'm working for Hershey as a contracted statistician, part-time, and I'm also finishing my thesis up right now, and then full-time MMA. So the whole time I've been in MMA, I've been working and pursuing school, and I plan on having school done this year.
Now, were you able to kind of pick your MMA schedule around that, or do you work that around your MMA schedule with your training?
I work that around my MMA schedule. I'm lucky to have a very flexible boss and company that lets me have a certain amount of hours a week, and as long as I get those in and get my jobs done and show up to a couple of meetings that are required, then I'm good to go.
Now, the last thing that I'm going to ask you, it's the last thing I always ask people at the end of the interviews. What advice do you have for a prospective MMA fighter that's looking to go from being an amateur and turning pro?
Get your brand out there. Whatever way you want to do it, make yourself stand out. Start the social media, start the ways of making money, contact sponsors yourself, and find a really good manager. Just walking in blind and winning fights, that's what we want to do, is just win fights and let that stand for us. But it doesn't work with all the competition that's out there nowadays. And it takes a lot of hard work. Don't think that a few fights in or even a few wins as a pro, you're going to get noticed by the UFC. You need to work your way up, go with good promotions, and make sure that people notice you.
Well, I would like to say thank you, Miranda, for coming on the show today. Of course, we wish you best of luck against Sabina Mazo next week on UFC Fight Night 203. Is there anything that you would like to say to anybody before we wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks for having me, one. And two, if everybody wants to go follow me, share stuff on my Instagram, it's at FeartheMaverick. My Twitter is also at FeartheMaverick, and so is my website. You can go check it out. And then also I have my website, FeartheMaverick.net, where you can get all kinds of merchandise. I'm hoping to have some new stuff out in the next few weeks.
Other than that will wrap things up. Thank you for coming on the show once again. Everybody can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And of course, if anybody could do this, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Fighters First. Wish Miranda Maverick the best of luck on her Instagram page. Give her a follow. She'd appreciate that. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Cage by IQ interviews. Other than that, I'm your host, Cage. This is Miranda Maverick, women's flyweight contender. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.